Hello, my name is Dr. Buser. I'm a psychiatrist in clinical practice in Asheville, North Carolina. And we are doing this series of videos to introduce people to the collected works of Marie-Louise von Franz. I'm one of two general editors of the series and have prepared extended versions of these talks, but I also wanted to do shorter 15 to 20 minute versions so people can get a taste of what the collected works of von Franz is about. If you haven't seen the earlier videos, particularly the biography ones, please consider viewing those first as you then dive into this one, which will be volume 1. This is my background. I won't go into much detail about this, but I'm a physician in Asheville, North Carolina, a psychiatrist, was in the Air Force for a number of years, did some training at the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago, founded the Asheville Jung Center, and now work with Chiron Publications. And this is the reason why we're doing these programs and these works. We are trying to fulfill the wishes of Marie-Louise von Franz before her death, in that she requested a collected works of her writings, and that's what we are in process of right now. This is a big project, 28 volumes, at least 10 years in duration. And we have just begun it. It's 2021 right now. We've produced 3 volumes so far, the first 3 volumes, and we are now on the next set. We're going to try to continue this process through all 28 or more volumes. These are the first 3 that have been released, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And they are part of a 5-volume subset, which are all titled Archetypal Symbols and Fairytales. And this was the very first work that she produced. She was in her early 20s when she began this task. And over the next 8 to 9 years, wrote these 5 volumes, the first 3 of which have now been released. Volume 1 came out in January 2021, and it is an overview of fairy tales, and particularly comparing and contrasting the profane and magical worlds, as well as the 4 archetypal others in the stories, and we'll be talking a fair amount about that in just a little bit. Volume 2 talks about the hero's journey, and volume 3 talks about the heroine or the maiden's journey. So this video is about volume 1 and the collected works of von Franz. There is the cover of the first volume. She began working on these first volumes at a very young age 24. She worked hours a day for the next 8 to 9 years, and the series was initially published under another author who didn't give credit to von Franz, despite her writing over 90% of the tomes. Later, that was corrected, and her rightful copyright was restored, and it was released in German initially, and now in English. The first 3 volumes are as such. Here are the covers again. So this first volume begins with the 12 background elements, water, sky, moon, etc. And there are individual chapters for each of these areas. And then the bulk of the rest of the title talks about the 4 primary archetypal others: the demonic father, the great mother, demonic shadow son, and the magical Anima daughter. And just so you know, even though it sounds unbalanced, that the masculine elements are daemonic and the feminine elements are great and magical, do keep in mind that daimon is different from demon. So it's not the demonic father, it's the daimonic father, which isn't quite as bad as a demon. The translators for these first 3 volumes were Roy Freeman and Anthony Wolfson. And this collection was really the first comprehensive work on fairy tale interpretation. It encompasses 5 volumes. The very first volume has 608 pages, so these are intense books. She mentions 863 fairy tales in the first volume alone. And it is no easy bedtime reading, but it is profound if you dive into some of this material with her. Each volume has numbered paragraphs, extensive footnotes, bibliography, index of author, fairy tales, and subject index. And very few would argue with the statement that von Franz really became the world's most prominent fairy tale interpreter. In the volume, she writes, it became evident that all the fairy tale images led to one central secret, whose meaning the following attempt to interpret hopefully approaches. Meaning that while she's interpreting these fairy tales in these books, she is trying to hone in on the core central secret within the fairy tale. What's the unconscious meaning that these fairy tales are trying to bring forth to us? Fairy tales have magic in them. They bring forth this idea of a liminal space. Time, space, causality is missing, and it can happen in any manner. They house pre-logical thought and primal experience. They all have magic, talking animals, enchanted objects, demon, witches, etc. And where the magic is, von Franz talks a fair amount about this, where you see the magic, there's the archetypal nature of the story. So in the beginning, she talks about these background elements, as well as contrasting what parts of the fairy tales are profane and which ones are sacred. What's the mundane versus the sacred elements. And that's the hero or heroine leaving the secular, normal, profane world and stepping into the magical, numinous, liminal, other kind of magical realm. Strikingly, inside the soul land, we almost always find some kind of a constructed, usually geometrically divided center, a castle or a palace, a four-cornered house, or a round lake with a mountain or island in the middle. The important processes take place in the center. It is here that we touch the central problem of the fairy tale. So the fairy tale itself is set up in a mandala of sorts. And there's this process where the hero or heroine goes from everyday life into the numinous magical fairy tale and then back to everyday life. Think of Jack and the Beanstalk. He starts in a normal, mundane place. He finds the magic seeds, beans, climbs the beanstalk, encounters the magical giant and other, then eventually comes back into the everyday life with that. The incidences in the magical realm of fairy tales are fundamentally similar to dream experiences in that the enchanted world represents the unconscious. So dreams and fairy tales overlap. Dreams are connecting us with the personal unconscious. If we have a dream, we're diving into our own unconscious and sometimes some collective layers deep inside, while a fairy tale is rooted in the collective unconscious. It happens over eons and develops from the well of the collective as opposed to an individual, typically. Von Franz talks about the four primary archetypal others. That's the daemonic father, the great mother, daemonic shadow son, the magical Anima daughter. And it's divided into these quadrants. If you have the hero or heroine in the center, you have the four others that he or she is engaging with. And they can be divided into the feminine and masculine, mother, daughter, father, son, or the ruler and authority versus the non-ruler, non-authority. The great mother and great father are the authorities, often king and queen, and the non-rulers are more the anima shadow elements of daughter and son. So we'll briefly talk about daemonic father. Again, daimon is different from demon. Daimon refers to a lesser deity or guiding spirit, such as the daimons of ancient Greek religion and mythology. And these can be helpful or harmful. The two primordial images that appear in almost every fairy tale, either one alone or together, are those of the father and mother. These parental images do not carry human or personal traits, but from time immemorial have been granted divine attributes. Father, grandfather, ancestor, teacher, old man, magician, medicine man, artisan, old chief, old king, etc. Generally speaking, the image of the father signifies the creative spiritual principle and the activating, life-energizing dynamic. So many, if not all, fairy tales have a father energy, a daimonic, great archetypal father that comes across in these different ways: king, father, grandfather, ancestor, etc. Shifting to the great mother. And in the longer version of these, we read a number of fairy tales. Typically, I'll read 2 to 4 fairy tales kind of per hour to talk. We don't have a lot of time, but I am going to read a brief fairy tale called The Other World. There once was a little child who every afternoon gave her a small bowl of milk and bread, which she would eat in the yard. But when she began to eat, a toad came creeping up, dipped its little head in the dish, and ate with her. The child took great pleasure in this. One day, when the toad did not come, she cried, "Toady, toady, come swiftly. Hither, come, thou tiny thing. Thou shalt have thy crumbs of bread. Thou shalt refresh thyself with milk." Then the toad came in haste and enjoyed his food. It even showed gratitude, for it brought the child all kinds of pretty things from its hidden treasures, bright stones, pearls, and golden playthings. The toad drank only milk, however, and left the breadcrumbs alone. Then one day the child took his little spoon and struck the toad gently on his head and said, "Eat the breadcrumbs as well, little thing." The mother, who was standing in the kitchen, heard the child talking to someone, and when she saw that she was striking a toad with her spoon, ran out with a log of wood and killed the good creature. From that time forth, a change came over the child. As long as the toad had eaten with her, she had grown tall and strong. But now she lost her pretty rosy cheeks and wasted away. It was not long before the funeral bird began to cry in the night, and the redbreast to collect leaves for the funeral wreath. And soon afterwards, the child lay on her funeral stand. Bit of a sad story. This story contains a piece of primitive mentality because the toad represents, through participation mystique, the vital center of the little girl herself. The toad gives her golden toys, showing that it represents the richness of the child's fantasy life. It symbolizes a part of her unconscious soul, and when her mother kills it, she commits murder of the soul of the child. The maternal significance of the toad is, of course, not limited only to its positive aspects. The toad is also the animal of the witch. Through her uncomprehending behavior, the real mother in the other world kills the life-giving archetype of the mother in the child. The intimate, necessary, and natural connection between real mother and child, which is based on Chthonic archetype of the mother, is cut, and thereby the child's vital connection to life is lost. The mother archetype, like the father archetype, makes use of various symbols and appears in positive and negative form, not only as mother, grandmother, nurse, godmother, demoness, and goddess, but also in a broader sense as, for example, city, forest, sky, sea, water, all vessels, etc. The Great Mother can be frightful, dark, and destructive, as well as good, cherishing, supportive, giving, and warm, a wise woman, the guardian of all things past, and knowing about the future. So we've briefly touched on the Daemonic Father, the Great Mother. Now we shift to the Daemonic Son, which carries a shadow. The hero does not always reach the rulers of the magical kingdom, but he meets other magical beings along the way. They approach the hero as emanations of the inner power of the magical kingdom. The encounter and relationship with these characters are portrayed in all fairy tales as momentous for the fate of the individual, especially if they appear concentrated in the figure of the son of the magical deities. The way in which the fairy tale hero confronts him decides his fate. So, as the hero or heroine approaches these archetypal others, particularly those that are non-rulers, if he or she engages constructively, helpfully with them, usually the fairy tale goes well, and if he or she resists, often it will go poorly. If one tries to derive a law for proper conduct from these tales, it would most likely be that in all circumstances, one can follow and trust one's own inner daimon, even if this brings one into conflict with prevailing opinion. If one opposes his or her inner voice, one loses the support of the unconscious and is punished by misfortune. If one lets oneself be guided by the unconscious without losing his or her head or sense of humor, the journey into the depths rewards one with unexpected riches. So that was the Daemonic Son. We shift now to the magical daughter, or the Anima. The character of the mysterious woman appears in fairy tales with divine, demonic, or animal attributes. Most of the stories point to the wonderful way in which this phenomenon, emerging from the other side, enters into the life of a person, such as when the fairy tale hero gains a human wife who is related to the magical realm. She also corresponds to the female figure of the soul that tends to occur in the dreams of men and whom Jung gave the name Anima. She embodies psychologically the irrational and often unconscious feelings in a man that sometimes can give rise to illogical effects. At the same time, like the figure of the shadow, the female figure personifies the unconscious with Rose's friendly and threatening content. So that was just a brief overview of the first volume. Again, there are 2 others. You can sign up for updates to the collected works. If you go to our website, chironpublications.com, please sign up your email so that we can let you know when the new volumes come up and when there's a new video or new other elements. We can also, of course, purchase the books there. If you would like the full version of this brief video, please let us know. My email is on the bottom, and we can present or direct you to the longer versions. And we are happy to meet with your group online or in person to discuss the collected works. And again, these are available at chironpublications.com, Amazon, and most other bookstores. So we'll keep in touch. Hopefully we'll be releasing more of these videos with the other volumes, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.